Hello and welcome to the ducking stool. Today I hope it'll be a quick look at Dr. Susan Oliver, PhD, Dr. PhD Susan Oliver, and her video on Did Doctor Kill Baby in Lucy Letby Case? Now, Dr. Susan Oliver, PhD, has been quite a vocal supporter of Lucy Letby's convictions. So if you're ready, we shall begin.
Here comes the science bit. Concentrate.
Hello and welcome to Back to the Science. I'm Dr. Susan Oliver and I'm a scientist.
Okay then, so just so you know, this is Dr. Susan Oliver, PhD. Her channel is called Back to the Science and she is a scientist. All right, we managed to get that.
And this is Cindy Oliver and she's a dog.
I am genuinely very charmed by this, and I hope that it's a sign of how she is going to make her content understandable to us thickos.
Okay, so a couple of weeks ago, I made a video about nurse serial killer Lucy Letby, which showed that some of the claims being made by her supporters were wrong.
I haven't seen that video. It appeared that she was saying we were all anti-vaxxers, but whatever.
Predictably, I got a number of comments from Letby supporters making the claims that I had just shown were incorrect. How to prove you didn't watch the video before commenting.
Okay, well, look, here we're starting to edge into, already a few seconds in, into my objection with her framing everything as I am a scientist, because this seems to be coming down very much to opinion and tribalism, and I admit that I am on one side of the fence on this argument. I do not think Lucy Letby had a fair trial. In fact, I doubt very much that she's guilty. So I'm on the other side of the fence. I've never had any personal clashes with Dr. Science Susan PhD, but fundamentally object to opinions being presented as if based in empirical fact due to a plea to authority, i.e. my qualifications. And it's partly that I just don't think this is the case, and I don't think it's very honest. The criticism I saw of her previous video was that she had built a straw man purportedly representing people's opinions, which she had then dismantled. As we know, that's a fallacy. It had all been wrapped up with an ad hom.
Anyway, I did also get a few people asking about the claims being made by a neonatologist.
Unfortunately, I'm going to have to zoom in as I'm finding the gesticulating extremely distracting.
At a recent press conference organised by her new barrister. The neonatologist was Dr. Richard Taylor, and he claimed that one of the babies that Letby was convicted of murdering was actually accidentally killed by a doctor.
Okay, so here we are already. She is stating that he has made these claims. Now, he certainly appears to be taking them as absolutely true and appears very horrified because he's read the reports, which, of course, Dr. Oliver has not. But these are not his claims. Something that she later in comments said, oh, no, I hadn't said that, I know he was summarising a report, but she says it again and again and again.
Now, before we go into the claims, I just want to show you another clip where Dr. Taylor explains why he first decided Letby may be innocent.
Right. So before she goes into the supposed claims of Dr. Taylor, when in fact he was just a neonatologist, also very concerned about the case, who has read and then relayed the details to the press and, of course, a lay audience. But why does she need to start with this? This is an odd thing to do, I think. Anyway, let's hear.
Obviously, I live in Canada, and so my introduction to the Lucy Letby case was on visits to the United Kingdom, and so the first I heard about it was last year during the trial. I was incredibly surprised because if you look at the history behind this and you look at Lucy Letby herself, you see a nurse, and nursing is an altruistic profession where people, especially in this country, nurses don't go into it for the money. They go into it because they want to help other people, almost universally. And I think that applies to her. She has no past history of any antisocial behavior, any criminal behavior, any psychiatric problems at all. There is no motive. Her friends are all completely astounded, flabbergasted by the accusations that were made against her. And so that immediately, for me, brought up red flags. So
this is entirely reasonable, and if the evidence is compelling, then he should be convinced otherwise.
So, in other words, Dr. Taylor was predisposed to thinking that Letby was innocent before he knew anything about the evidence.
That is shamelessly dishonest. He said he was very surprised. He said her lack of a criminal or antisocial behaviour history raised red flags. He certainly hasn't mentioned the evidence that concerned him. But we don't know at what stage, what conversations were going on. So, he may have heard one of Dowie Evans' ridiculous comments and responded from there. We just don't know. This is a ridiculous attempt at dismissing him as a crank when in fact he's a neonatologist with the requisite knowledge which she does not have. It appears she works in chemistry, so she's not a medical doctor whatsoever. And the reason she's raised this so early before it even goes on to him explaining the report is because she wishes to poison the well and make him look like a deluded fool.
Taylor was predisposed to thinking that Letby was innocent before he knew anything about the evidence against her. And the reason for this is because he thinks all nurses are nice.
That's not what he said at all. That is completely dishonest. He said nursing is an altruistic profession, almost universally. He said he was incredibly surprised because nurses generally go into it with a selfless and, a selfless intent and wishing to help people. They don't get paid much. This is almost universally. That's what he says. So why, Susan, are you so intent on preemptively poisoning the well? That's my question.
He also appears to be under the misapprehension that all her friends still support her. Some of them definitely do and have spoken to the media about this. But a number of the doctors and nurses who gave evidence against her at the trial had been her friends before they found out she was a murderer.
Okay, Susan, I really think he was talking about friends as in the more obvious sense, like people who've known her since before her nursing career, throughout her nursing career, not colleagues she was friendly with. We know the consultants had a thing against her and wanted her removed. We know that one of the nurses was contacted by Thirlwall for her impression and what she saw of Letby, and she said, I worked closely with Letby. She was an exemplary nurse and has been treated appallingly. We also know at the Thirlwall inquiry, Dr. Juriskova said she has grave doubts that she is guilty of these crimes. I think Susan Oliver here is referring to Dr. A. Dr. A was clearly pursuing Lucy Letby, and as much as he's been referred to as her boyfriend, there certainly doesn't seem to be any evidence whatsoever that he spent the night at her home, that there was anything like that going on. When we talk normally about friends of people in this situation, we are talking about their friends from their home life, normally. For example, Beverly Allett, her boyfriend, came forward to say after her arrest, certainly, that she was violent. She had made up false claims of sexual assault, that she had claimed to be pregnant and wasn't. We also know that about Virginia McCulloch, who killed her two parents and lived in the house with them, with their bodies, for several years. She had claimed to be pregnant. The neighbours all had stories about her very bizarre antics. That's the sort of thing we're talking about. With Beverly Allett, she had childhood friends come forward saying she was consistently appearing at school with braces and splints and bandages that she never really gave a thorough or genuine explanation for. This is the sort of thing I believe he's referring to. Or one of the other very few women who have been given whole life orders, Joanna Dennehy, who really is a wildly atypical offender. Her ex-boyfriend or ex-husband, certainly the father of her two young children, he had all sorts of stories, so did neighbours. These are the people around an offender that we normally hear lots about. The Southport killer, he's another one. We're hearing lots now about things that happened in his school. This is the sort of thing that we tend to hear about serial killers afterwards. I think I'm going to have to do a video on this at some point. But there's none of that with Letby, is there? No. All we have is Dr. A, who was a married man, 17 years her senior, clearly pursuing her. She was often seeming to knock him back after he was messaging her at 1 o'clock in the morning, saying he can't sleep, and she would respond with stuff about, I can't either, I'm so upset about those babies and their poor parents. This doesn't fit at all, not at all, with any depiction of a serial killer I have ever seen. And whether it be his wife or his employers, it was certainly in Dr. A's interest to stop backing Lucy Letby, wasn't it?
The important point, though, is that Dr. Taylor, as well as the other two neonatologists whose report he summarises for the press conference, all believed in her innocence before seeing any of the medical records.
Whereas you, Susan, are convinced she is guilty and you haven't seen them at all. Now, I am unaware of how the Australian judicial system functions. I very much doubt it's very different to England, and that is, we start with the presumption of innocence. So, to convict somebody, you have to be more than fairly convinced that he probably did it. You have to be sure. You have to be absolutely sure. Now, to say that they started with a presumption of innocence is somehow a bias is absolutely nuts, particularly when we are now looking at it as a stage of this young woman with all of the information that has been readily available to the public, enough to convince you that she is guilty, enough to convince me that something is really very, very wrong. All of that has been available to them, and they, unlike you or I, are neonatologists. They are experts, and they are eminent ones at that. So this information that was available to us all, enough to give us our opinions, was enough for them to think, my God, something is really wrong here. So if you believe that even after reading through all of the medical reports, the contemporaneous notes, the medical histories, the transcripts of the trial, thousands and thousands of pages of stuff, that their view is to be dismissed or viewed with suspicion, then I really wonder what kind of world we would be in if someone was sent down for life and there were so many concerns over the quality of the evidence, over the whole running of the case, when people who specialise in the very subject that is being discussed and has been used to condemn somebody for the rest of her life, globally villainised, when they speak up to say this doesn't make sense, then the very fact they think it doesn't make sense is a reason to dismiss them. This would be a very worrying precedent, wouldn't it? And let's not forget, if the standard is you have to be sure to convict, it is those who are so convinced in her guilt who are on the back foot here. So that's a higher standard. Well, yes, she was convicted. Not many of these convictions were unanimous, were they? No, they weren't. In fact, it's pretty suspect. It's pretty suspect that one of the jurors was overheard saying that they had made their minds up all already. And if you've been paying attention, you will know. Judge Goss's directions to the jury are also highly suspect and appear to have led them. So now turning back to Susan's video and her, after her preemptive strike at poisoning the well and her repeated references to this being Dr. Taylor's claims and Dr. Taylor's theories, she often uses the refrain, so if you know about the case, or if you've been following the case, then you will know. And it seems like quite an obvious manipulative tactic to me, assigning knowledge only to her point of view. It's a way to flatter herself and those who agree with her. So after Dr. Taylor's summary of the report, she then supposedly refutes it with what she says are transcripts gained from the Crime Scene to Courtroom channel. Though, I mean, I really don't believe he has presented anything that wasn't already in the contemporaneous reports from the Chester Standard during the trial. She speaks of the pathologist and his discussion over injuries to child O's liver. She refers to the pathologist as having had the child's body. It's just really horrible. And I found that thumbnail of her video quite tasteless as well, although maybe I'm on shaky ground because I take the piss here all the time. I don't know. It didn't seem appropriate to me. But yeah, talking about the actual post-mortem autopsy is really, really sensitive stuff. But she seems to confuse Dr. Marna Reeds with Dr. George Kakai, who was the one who actually performed the post-mortem. Dr. Kakai never said that he was discounting the needle stick injury to the liver being the cause of hemorrhage. He suspected it may have come from the umbilical catheter. Dr. Manarides then rejected this possibility, although it took him some time, actually. And this is perhaps why he was chosen as the prosecution pathologist. Apparently chosen by Dowie Evans as well, which is interesting. Anyway, at this stage, I have run entirely up against the hilt of my knowledge. I could start reading through reports and pointing to things that I believe are inconsistencies. I could start pointing to the change in Dr. Manarides' opinion after speaking to Dr. Evans. I could point to the children's death certificates and say the fact that they were overwritten by a long retired neonatologist is dodgy as hell. I'm not going to do that. I am not a specialist in anything, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Despite this video being, well, it's from the channel called Back to Science by Dr. PhD, who is a scientist. At no point does she go to the science. She merely contradicts the summary as delivered by Dr. Taylor. With the sworn testimony of the prosecution pathologist, Dr. Manarides, who discounted things that the original pathologist, who actually did see the child's body, would not, and who eventually came to a different conclusion to the pathologist who had actually seen the body. So, going back to the trial testimony and implying that Dr. Manarides had seen the child's body, she believes she's debunked a neonatologist who was summarising a report. She has begun by trying to destroy his credibility, repeatedly referred to these theories as being his, and then gone on to discredit the opinion of two expert neonatologists, two experts who have an incredible level of knowledge above hers, who have seen an enormous amount of information, more than she has, and tried to completely dismiss that with evidence already heard in a very, very contested court case. All to dismiss a report she has not read. I don't think that's science. All of this is extraordinarily upsetting. Losing your baby is probably the worst thing that can happen to you. Then to have to confront the fact that they've had a post-mortem is just horrible, really heartbreaking. And then for it to become public fodder and debate is beyond distressing. So my heart genuinely really does go out to the parents. This is awful. I don't see a way around this, unfortunately. But yeah, you know, it's impossible not to be thinking of just how distressing this is. I think I will leave that there. Thank you for listening, and hopefully see you again. I'm having serious trouble uploading videos at the moment because I am only using my phone. My laptop got destroyed, so it has proven tricky. But thanks. Bye-bye. Next time, I'm hoping I'll be able to tackle the just unspeakably abusive behaviour of those on Twitter, particularly, who believe Lucy Letby is guilty. This ranges from everything. There seems to be no holds barred on what they will do and say to upset people who disagree with them. This involves people's children. It's all really horrific. So I think this needs outing, but let's see if this uploads. Anyway, thanks very much. Bye-bye.